So on Tuesday, more than 1,700 prisoners were released early from English and Welsh jails. Over the next few months, 5,500 prisoners are due to be released. They're going to serve 40% of their term rather than the usual 50%. And this is because the prisons are full and at breaking point. Candice, what have you made of this? I mean, this is absolutely extraordinary. I know how much pressure the prisons are under, but this is no solution to the problem, is it?
Well, I find it fascinating because not too long ago in May, under Sunak's government, they released loads of prisoners, and Starmer was so hypercritical of it. He said, can you guarantee that no high-risk prisoners are going to be released and are going to commit crime again? And then guess what? He finds himself in the exact same place.
And it's worth pointing out, these were prisoners, they were being released maybe 2 weeks early or something like that, where a lot of the prisoners released this week had their sentences shortened substantially.
So that's the really key point. I think that's what a lot of people are quite shocked by, that you've got people who haven't served anywhere near their whole sentence. There's a big outcry from the public who feel that justice isn't being served. And I think that this is part of just huge dysfunction within the prison system and the justice system. You don't have good rehabilitation in prisons. People are coming out, they're reoffending at very high rates. Even with this release of prisoners, the big criticism has been that the probation service hasn't been properly prepared for this. I mean, a lot of them are going to be homeless when they come out. They've got nothing. They were just told, right, you're going out and that's it. And that's going to lead to high reoffending rates. But I think also, the point to make about that is that Starmer was very critical of Rishi Sunak when he released prisoners, but he kind of walked into the same thing himself, because I think Starmer and his government don't have many good ideas. And they don't have vision. And I thought the same when I watched Trump and Kamala. I thought we're in a time of visionless politicians who don't really have good solutions to problems. Not even like interesting solutions or trying to be innovative in any way. You just feel like they're constantly plugging the gaps with everything.
Well, it's like they're just, these prisoners are just numbers. So we just move them out of the prison, put them into the probation service, then presumably leave it to them to deal with. The head of probation has said he expects a third of them will reoffend and be sent back to prison pretty soon. Tom, what do you...
No, I think that's exactly right. It's technocrat brain, and it's the same thing with Rishi Sunak, who kind of left this issue of the overcrowding of prisons hitting almost maximum capacity as like a nice little surprise for Starmer to deal with. At the very least, didn't deal with it during the tail end of his tenure, so that Starmer would have to deal with it.
It was on, people may remember Sue Gray, Keir Starmer's chief of staff. She drew up what she called a shit list of things that are going to hit the fan when they come into government, and this was one of them. So the other things we have to look forward to are universities collapsing and a water company collapsing. So that'll be fun in due course.
Exactly. Plenty more jokes to be had. But this one is interesting as well, because it's an indictment of the entire political class, really, and the technocrat brain that seems to pervade amongst those people, which is to say they are incapable of thinking beyond the next news cycle, which is, in a sense, this prisoner release is a good example of that, because so many of them are going to reoffend. Those people will also need prison places, but because it gets them out of the near-term issue, they just go ahead and do it. The fact that you're getting into a situation where whatever debates in society we might want to have about who should be in prison, non-violent offenders, why isn't rehabilitation working, all the rest of it, you shouldn't be in a situation where just sheer capacity is dictating how long people's sentences are. That's obviously a dreadful state of affairs. But it's incredible that they so focused on the kind of short-term political issues and the short-term technocratic, how many spaces do we have, that there's no interest in broader solutions. Could be drastic things, could be a more long-term sort of policy. It just becomes, how can we deal with the short term and then the medium term be damned in all of these situations, which is really, really strange. But it's also, I think, a reminder of how, on a slightly more substantial but nevertheless telling level, politically shit this lot are. Like, they have no sense of what's going to prove to be unpopular. They've tried to make a virtue out of this idea of making tough decisions. But that's just trying to make a virtue out of doing loads of really unpopular things, which is obviously going to prove unpopular, which is obviously going to become a problem for you. And this is in the absence of anything else. This is not like, they're letting some of the prisoners out, but the sunlit uplands beckons. What have we got? We've had we are going, things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to smoke outside soon. I mean, this is a kind of prospectus for the country.
Yeah.
I just think it speaks to a dearth of vision, but also just the basic political ineptitude of these people.
But it's also just fundamentally anti-democratic to assume, well, the people are stupid. If something's unpopular, if it sounds tough, therefore
it must be good. Yeah.
It must be good because those idiots don't like it. And, we know what's better for them. I mean, it also speaks to, I think, a broader problem, which is the sheer decriminalization of crime, if that doesn't sound too alarmist, because it's not just that, people are being let out of prison early. This is affecting sentencing. Judges have been essentially told that they should bear in mind the prison capacity when handing down sentences. So that means people getting suspended sentences when really they probably are a danger to the community. It also, we've seen, particularly with crimes like shoplifting or, burglaries or people getting your phone or your bike nicked, people know that the police won't come or they won't solve those crimes. There's a recent report by Dispatches that found that in over 160 areas of London, not a single what they call neighbourhood crime was solved by the police in the last 3 years. So that includes bike theft, phone theft, robbery, vehicle crime. It's as if the message being sent constantly by the political class is that you can commit crime, you'll get away with it, we're not going to do anything about it. And most of all, that ordinary members of the public and your safety don't matter.
Yes, they're not attuned to what the public want. I think that's the most striking thing about this Labour government. And I think they won in a loveless landslide. It was more that there was huge dissatisfaction with the Conservatives. I think there was a splitting of the right with Reform. And I think that's why Labour got through. But I don't think that they've ever really been able to grip the moment or grip the issue or these things that really matter to people. They can't quite reflect it. And I think that there is so much moral and political confusion with them, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the releasing of these prisoners, and what they've done by trying to say that they're making tough choices and it's going to be painful, they've actually just invited irritation.
Yeah.
They think people will understand what they're trying to say, but it's not. It's not at all. It's the same with this 22 billion black hole thing, this line that they've obviously been told to take, that they're ramming down everyone's throats. They think the more they say it, the more people will believe it. But I think the opposite is actually happening. Yeah. And people have become scrutinizing it even more. I mean, there was a big report in the FT this morning saying, what is this 22 billion black hole? You need to provide more details about it. And this is this government. I think that I don't necessarily find them worrying. I just find them bungling and quite incompetent in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, the black hole is fascinating because Rachel Reeves said explicitly in an interview with the FT again before the election that I know that I can't just go in because everything is now public, because we have the Office for Budget Responsibility and things like that, which Labour are very keen on for some reason. She said, we can't just go in and pretend that there's a black hole and we have to make tough decisions. Everyone knows the state of the public finances. They are, pretty much public. And now they're saying the Treasury officials, supposedly neutral civil servants, are saying we can't give any details on what this black hole is. We can't explain it. We haven't done the maths yet. Yeah. Because it's obviously a political figure. Related to that, I do want to talk about the winter fuel allowance, because again, this is another one of these decisions that Keir Starmer is saying it's a tough decision, therefore it must be the right one. What have you made of that particular row?
Well, it's incredible how they don't seem to see how controversial things are going to be until they happen. I think maybe it's the idea that they're still possessed with this idea that they've got this tremendous mandate, even though, as you were saying, Candice, it's entirely built on sand. But the idea that depriving pensioners of this winter fuel allowance, the people who qualify for a version of it, which has now been sort of tapped onto other pension benefits, is a relatively small proportion of them. There's a lot of talk in this country about pensions as if they're all living it up. They're barely on dry land. They're on a saga cruise every other week. That all of them did absolutely fantastically out of the housing market, and therefore they're all living the life of Riley. This is complete nonsense. I mean, a lot has been done on the issue of pensioner poverty, but it was only because it used to be tremendously, tremendously bad. And it's actually relative success story that started to be alleviated. And also then politically, you get into a situation where you're saying, okay, so these tough choices involve taking benefits away from those people least able to withstand the tough times, because you can't go out and get a second job in order to, pay for your inflated fuel bill now that these benefits have been deprived to you. And yet they don't seem to even see these controversies kind of coming over the hill. They didn't even necessarily seem to see how controversial it would be within the Labour Party itself, which is something which is really quite strange. Obviously, there was one rebellion, but a lot of abstentions as a consequence of this.
Yeah, 50 or so abstentions. A bit pathetic.
And what is the message that has been sent by all of this? You know, there's been this crackdown on free speech. There's been this releasing prisoners early. There's been backing policies, i.e. removing the winter fuel allowance. Up until about 5 minutes ago, the Labour Party was saying this will kill 4,000 people. Now they've decided that that's not necessarily a problem. And then when you try and work out, okay, but what's the bigger picture? What's the argument, the message, the vision? All of that's terrible. It's just like the green agenda, which is basically a fantasy. That's the only way that you could see that as a positive, if you really think that windmills and solar panels is going to deliver us to a much more higher standard of living. And it's identity politics, the race equality bill, which will come down the pipe at some point, and stopping you smoking in the rare places that you're able to do so currently. You just think, why did anyone think that this would be even an attractive proposition for the public, know? And there's not even an attempt to, try and push back against any of these things. So it's a weird combination of them being actually on they're much more vulnerable politically than they seem to realise, and yet they seem to keep blundering through one of these issues after another. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the weakness of the opposition, plays a big role in that. Or the fact that actually the Tories agree with them on half of this stuff, unfortunately.
Yes, it's true. Well, actually, that was something Theresa May considered, scrapping the winter fuel allowance, and Labour really attacked her on it, and she backed away from it. And then with mind-bending hypocrisy, suddenly Labour are fronting this policy.
Yeah.
But it's so true. I don't think the Conservatives have been an effective opposition at all. I think most of the opposition to what Labour are doing is coming from civil society.
Yeah.
It's coming from journalists. It's coming from ordinary people who I think have sort of lost faith in the political class to grip the issues that matter to people.